We have been recording. I'll delete the first part of it though. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy to be able to host this morning both Representative Chapman and Representative Tharinger are on with us. And so this will be a fairly open forum. If you would please keep your mic muted so that there won't be any background noise. We'd really appreciate that. And they'll both talk for a bit, and then we will open it up for questions. And initially, if you'll put your questions in the chat or even just your name, I'll go ahead and call on you. And then if we kind of have a lull, and you can, just take your turn and ask a few questions if you'd like. So between Representative Chapman and Representative Tharinger, who would like to kick it off for us this morning?
The senior member always gets to go first.
Oh, okay, got it.
Senior and seniority.
And not in age?
Well, there's that too.
All of the above. Mike, but I thought you were kind of the main deal today. I was just batting cleanup backup. I was just a utility player.
Well, probably we should just get to questions as quick as possible. You and I both just spent 3 months probably talking more than we needed to. So just real quick, just so people know, we're going through our reorganization meetings right now and setting all of our committee assignments. And so we're just kind of doing some internal work. We do have what's called committee days coming up right around the corner, where the various House and Senate committees will be kind of having a pre-session set of meetings. Still doesn't look like there's going to be a session before January. I know there's a lot of talk about with the latest restrictions. Should we go to a special session? Just doesn't sound like the governor's interested in that right now. But we're starting our process of kind of prioritizing what is our legislation going to be, what are our priorities going to be, what's the budget going to look like. Prior to this current round of shutdowns, the budget was looking better. We won't know now until the next quarter what this current slowdown will do to our budget. And I think for me, I'm going to try to continue to serve on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee. I'm still going to serve on transportation. Transportation is going to be a big deal because the chair of transportation, who's I've said before is the Port Angeles High School graduate, but he represents Tacoma. He does want to reform car tabs. I think he's kind of figured out that the high car tabs that people were paying just doesn't seem to be something that people are willing to pay. So Transportation Committee is going to be looking at revenue in a way of reforming car tabs so that doesn't irritate the people so much, but also not to lose the revenue. And as you all know, I've worked hard for some significant projects on the peninsula, including the Elwha Bridge replacement, which is still budgeted, still in the budget, still funded, and still moving forward. It's a laborious process to acquire the land because it's National Park Service land. So it's kind of taking an act of Congress literally to acquire that, but they're moving forward. Should be out to bid. They're hoping by next summer and maybe starting construction by next fall. The Morse Creek Interchange project is out for bid. So it's not an interchange, but a safety project. And is just a reminder, for $500,000, we could have stuck Jersey barriers down the middle of Morse Creek. And yes, that would have, it would have maybe saved some of the accidents, but it also would have created a toboggan-like situation, especially for vehicles coming down the hill. So we worked hard and came up with a number of millions of dollars to create more of a boulevard style, which will be divided median with landscaping. So it'll actually be, as you go through that beautiful corridor, we just didn't think Jersey barriers was really the right look, nor was it really going to do the safety project that we needed. So this will be a raised median with landscaping that will dissipate traffic if people end up crossing what now is the center line. Should also make it easier during inclement weather or traffic accidents, because you could then maybe divert vehicles to the other side of the road. Anyway, so that's fully moving forward. And then the next, if we do get new revenue in transportation, and I think Steve met with the city of Sequim last week and it was in the paper. We really do need to come up with funding for the whole corridor project between Sequim and Blinn. It's a huge priority for Sequim. It's a huge priority for Blinn. The chair of transportation, Jake Fye, Representative Fye, is supportive of the project. And as long as we can come up and backfill the loss of car tab revenue and come up with a new revenue package, he thinks we can begin to break. We've got planning money in the budget now, and he's supportive of that project. He grew up here, so he knows our transportation needs. It's actually it's like getting maybe a third representative out here, just because he's out here all the time. He has family property, has a road named after his family. It's Fye Road. We call it Fye Road, but it's really Fay Road west of town. So he corrects me every time I mention Fye Road. So that's kind of where we're at, and be looking ready to get started in January. And I don't know, Steve's on a prop, so he might have a little more budget information.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I spent the last couple days, I'm on the committee on committees, which is kind of a interesting title, but we actually, as the majority caucus, there's about 22 of us that spent the last couple days talking about which committees we'll have in the legislature for the next 2 years and what their sort of book of business will be, and then setting up a schedule for those committees. And we finished that work yesterday afternoon, spent the first 2 days of Monday and Tuesday working on that. And that'll become public here pretty quick. Then the next step is to send out the schedule and the committee descriptions, and members, both parties, send in their requests, what committees they want to be on, what positions they want. So each committee has at least a chair and a vice chair, and then a ranking member and assistant ranking member from the minority party. And then those final decisions are made. Usually they, both caucuses just accept what each caucus has presented, and then those are finalized, and probably around the first, sometime in December, obviously before we go into session in January. The session will be remote. So all of us are learning Zoom and Microsoft Teams and different things. That will be challenging. As a lot of you know, work gets done and when you go to conferences and things in the hallways, and that's really the case in the legislature. A lot of work gets done on the floor when you're talking to different members, or in the hallways talking to lobbyists and other folks. So I think what that means is a very shortened number of bills that will move through the process this year. I think it's important for people to maybe look at this more so than ever as a biennial effort, a 2-year effort. So there might be some major policy bills that come forward in the first year, but because they need more work and more just dialogue among people, they might not pass till next year, to the supplemental year. Of course, we have to do a budget, both for appropriations for the biennium and a transportation budget, as Mike referred to, and then I'll be working on a capital budget. We have the 1st of December, I think December 2nd and 3rd, we have committee days. Those, of course, those will also be remote. And for the capital budget, we'll be talking about school construction and impacts to schools around because of COVID. Like what are their needs? Are there, and trying to figure out what expenditures we might need for, say, more or improved HVAC systems, or do they need plexiglass, or what are the issues that the virus has sort of raised on the capital side that we can maybe address to help us keep the schools, open them up if they're not open, but maintain safety. As folks have learned again this week, and the virus is really writing the script here. And the surge has really had huge impacts. And I'm sure we'll get to some discussion around this on, certainly small businesses and other people's businesses, but as looking at the data, even in Clallam and Jefferson County, we have now the highest number of cases we've ever had. All of that is bad news, and bad news both for people that are getting the disease and have to be concerned about the disease, but also, as a lot of folks on this call know, it's an impact on business. So it's just, it's a huge challenge. In that regard, obviously there's good news around vaccines, and that, bodes well in the future. What that timeline is you folks has been following the news probably know as well as I do, but it's not something that we're going to see have impact probably on this legislative session. It's probably more something later in the spring or summer where we start using that tool to manage this virus. I think that's about it. I'm really, I'm sure folks have a lot of questions, and so why don't we just move to that right now, Colleen?
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. One of the things, though, I would like to discuss, and I know Mike and I had a conversation, Representative Chapman and I had a conversation about this yesterday, was of course, the new restrictions on businesses, and which then, of course, means layoffs once again. And it also means that businesses are going to have a tough time being able to pay their normal operating expenses like rent and the like. And so there was a discussion around from the governor about $50 million that would be available to businesses. And so just so everyone knows, we are trying to communicate with Commerce before final decisions are made, where on Monday there was some information that came out about how that would occur, and basically trying to fight for our fair share here in Clallam County and Jefferson County in the 24th District, and making sure that the processes that they use allow our businesses to get a reasonable amount of funding, considering that there's not enough funding for all the businesses in the state. And Mike, do you want to talk about that, share kind of what we're trying to do in that regard? Oh, you're on mute. I'm going to unmute you. There,
am I unmuted now?
now you're unmuted.
Okay, so like you said, we're trying to set up a meeting with you and Brian Kuh, Team Jefferson, and Steve and Kevin and I with the Department of Commerce to kind of go over their funding formula, and just to make sure that because it does look like there's maybe some disparities between the size of counties and the number of dollars that that we're able to allocate. And we know we've got a good track record. Obviously, the county commissioners are working with EDC in both Jefferson and Clallam County, and Grace Harbor County is also involved in this process. So we're going to hopefully have this meeting in the next day or two just to kind of go over the funding process with Commerce. And this is going to be an ongoing circumstance, because I think that it's inevitable that the legislature is going to continue to allocate some funds to help our local businesses in the next budget year. So I don't think we've quite figured out the time for everybody to join. But I will say for all the folks on the call that Colleen's taken a real leadership and advocating, both her and Brian for Team Jefferson are advocating strongly and making the case to make sure that we get all the dollars that should be allocated to our areas for small businesses. So you have a great advocate. She's tireless. She was contacting me on Sunday afternoon. So she doesn't rest. I didn't get back to her till Monday, but I did. But we talked on Monday, and then we're setting a meeting now. So
They made the mistake of giving me their cell phone numbers, so I text them.
No, and that's good. It just shows how important all of this is and how much time it takes. I will say, people have been contacting once the governor made his announcement Sunday morning. I had a number of phone calls from folks that were concerned with what the legislature could and couldn't do, and certainly, that's been a concern ever since March. So I do wish, I wish I had more answers. Right now, it is the directives from the governor. So I learned when you all learned. I had a little bit of a heads up he was going to make some sort of an announcement, but I had to watch the news on Sunday morning like all of you. So we're scrambling, and it's only Wednesday morning, and we're already trying to make some progress to free up, see if we can't free up some more funds. So that's kind of but it's been busy couple of days. Definitely people are engaged. Definitely people are concerned. And I think you're seeing it on the federal level too. We're not the only state that's had to make some restrictions. So Colorado has had to make some restrictions. Their governor did just call their legislature back into special session in Colorado. Other states are taking progress, but then we can't just look to the federal government either. We have some ability to help folks here, but obviously any federal plan that may or may not pass in their lame duck session would be helpful. If not, we'll have to look for the incoming administration to try to put together a piece of legislation. And I know Congressman Kilmer have been in contact with him and his office, and they're working on it at a federal level. So, yeah, these are challenging times. But people are engaged.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and go to the chat here. And so Dale, you have a question about unemployment rates. Do you want to go ahead and ask that? Dale Dunning from the Oasis.
Okay, yeah, and I'm going to ask a question. I also want to let you know this latest thing on the governor is just taken a bad for us in the hospitality industry. This is terrible. We've taken body blows all year, and then you think you're just starting to recover, and this is just another punch in the gut. On Monday, I sat down with each one of my 22 employees, and I had to lay off 14 employees. And we tried to do it by who had the most need and all that. But there's going to be people really, really hurting, and this has to be a priority for everybody, more so than anything, because the most vulnerable people in this state are the ones that are really getting hurt the hardest. Personally, as a business, I've got enough cash to hold on for 2 months, but at the end of that, what happens? So my question also specifically, what specific legislation are you guys thinking about for the unemployment rates? I mean, we're going to get killed on that if it goes through as normal. So what are you guys doing? What specific legislation are you talking about?
So I serve on the labor committee, or I did serve on the labor committee the last 2 years. So I've been in contact with the current chair of labor, and he meets regularly with the unemployment folks. And everybody knows that what would normally be the rate of increase is unsustainable. So we're hoping that the federal government will be able to backfill a significant portion of this. We think that they can, and the governor's office and unemployment insurance folks are looking at what rate increase will be necessary. It's a bipartisan concern. So I've heard from both Republicans and Democrats that what would be the normal rate is just not going to be feasible. So I think that you're going to see some package, some budgetary adjustments, maybe stretch out the time frame to replenish the fund, and then hopefully find the federal dollars, and the federal government can step up to help backfill those funds in a short amount of time. But right now we don't know, and there's no legislation per se. It's a budgetary, there is legislation that guides how the fund is operated, and that's something that we've all learned. And so the legislation already occurs. So whether we amend that legislation to change how the fund replenishes itself, or whether we just do it through a budgetary process, but there is concern. And I think there's real concern that it will be magnified. I don't think people are realizing it's going to be magnified potentially because of the number of businesses that may go out of business. So your pool to rebuild would be even less to draw upon. So we understand the issue. And the labor committee's been working on this all summer. And Steve, I don't know if you have anything else to add from the budget side.
Yeah, no, Mike, I think you covered it pretty well. I think there was some concern My understanding is the program works on a calendar year, so it looks like we're fine through the end of this year. And that does give us time in the session to adjust this. It is driven by statute and some federal nexus. And so it's a little tricky to just go in and change those rates. But as Mike says, it's on everybody's screen. And I think it's a huge jump. It's from 0.25 to 1.25 the way it stands right now. And that's really, as you say, Dale, kind of a body blow when people are already up against the rope. So the idea is to try to figure out some way to spread out that timeline so that obviously the account has to be replenished at some point, but not do it now when everyone's struggling. And I think I haven't heard anybody that's not interested in working on that. So I think we'll come up with some sort of solution. I guess the good news is it doesn't happen right away. My understanding, it wouldn't have kicked in till, you know, later into 2021. So we'll have a chance to take a look at it.
Because we'll be getting the new rates in the beginning of December. That's usually when they mail it out to us.
Yeah, and I don't think that will happen, is my understanding. But you know, I could be wrong because the account you would get the new rate, but it's not, you're not billed for it till later in the following year.
Yeah, it's end of first quarter is when we pay it. But you know,
Right.
we collect, you know, what our deductions and all that are based on that. So
Yeah.
okay. And
Okay.
you guys, while I'm on here and I have it, this $50 million, I've heard rumors that it's not just 50 million for small business. They're trying to target different things. Do you know what the breakdown on that is? Because that's not a lot of money when you consider how many small restaurants and gymnasiums and all that are out there that have really been, by this shutdown, just punched in the gut.
I think that's one of the issues we're going to try to work with Commerce on, and then it's an issue that we're going to have to take up in January because, yeah, 50 million is just not enough. And I think everybody realizes that. I did get a memo yesterday. There's some legislation being written to tap into the rainy day fund on an emergency basis for small businesses. So we'll see where that goes. But I think without federal action, I think the state's going to have to step up significantly more.
Yeah, one of the proposal I was told on Monday from Commerce was that of the 50 million, 30 million would go to loans for CDFI, Community Development Financial Institutions, and that for businesses that needed a loan during COVID-19 that had been impacted by COVID-19. And 20 million would go to businesses. And when that was shared with the EDCs from across the state, they received a lot of pushback on that because what we have found, certainly in Clallam County with Craft 3, is that, you know, we've got a $500,000 loan through Craft 3 is a CDFI, Community Development, Certified Development Financial Institution. And they, you know, they're not able to get that money out there. There aren't businesses that want to double down on their liabilities at this point. And so that they received a lot of pushback on that. And so they said, Brian Koo actually emailed Commerce and some of the decision makers there, and they said, hold off, we understand this. We'll be getting back to you in a few days to let you know what the plans are. So, you know, I've held from the beginning that what I'm hearing from businesses is that these mandated shutdowns their grants are needed, not necessarily loans. So, especially for the really small businesses. And between the two counties, Clallam and Jefferson, we have over 10,000 small businesses and very, very few large businesses. Our large employers are government or commercial retail, like the Home Depot and Safeways and, you know, and the like in our counties. And so that you know, that's the lifeblood of our economies. And, you know, folks, as we've seen, aren't interested in those loans. So we hope that there'll be some more funding forthcoming for businesses. And we've had, in Clallam County, we've had an enormous amount of requests in comparison to other counties. And I don't know if that's because the need is different or because of the mixture of our types of businesses in our county, or whether we've gotten the word out. But yeah, so we'll see, you know, what happens. I would think that we'll hear something this week about what their plans will be for that. So next, Kai Alberg from the Port Angeles Business Association has a question.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike and Steve, for taking the time to be here with us this morning. My question is kind of a little broader, the issue that Dale raised. And I just want to illustrate it quickly with a specific example of friends of ours who have a small restaurant. They opened it a year and a half ago. They made it through the first winter, then they were shut down. They managed to survive just barely with a PPL loan. They were now hoping to make it through the winter with the increased business that they usually have between Thanksgiving and New Year's. And with this shutdown, they're pretty much at the end of their rope. And as Colleen said, in these kinds of cases, what you really need is grants. I talked to them, well, why don't you avail yourself of the governor's rent moratorium? They said, well, all that happens is when the moratorium is over, we'll owe 6 months of rent and we can file for bankruptcy then. It doesn't help us. There's no way we'll have 6 months rent on the day we're allowed to reopen. So unless there is help for businesses like those, and I think the help can come in terms of grants, but also in relief on other exactions of the state government. So for example, this is a very small operation. It's basically the family with one employee sometimes when they have some extra business. In September, their L&I payments were $1,900 in 1 month. If the business is going well, sure, they have so much income, they pay their L&I, no problem. But there has to be a way, either through grants or through relief on things like B&O and L&I, to allow those businesses to survive. Because otherwise, you're going to have a business will never reopen. You'll have a family that won't be able to pay the rent on their personal residence, and they'll be on an unemployment. They won't be able to employ anybody next year, and they don't have time till March or April next year when the legislature has gone through the process. They don't have 4 or 5 months to wait. So what, if anything, can be done, given the governor's unwillingness to recall the legislature, to help folks that won't make it through April?
Beats me.
Well, I mean, hopefully this conversation we're going to have with Commerce will at least free up, you know, what is our fair share coming into the state, into our county. So that's the first step, and that's something concrete that's in the works. I think, you know, we'll probably, I think legislators are weighing in with the governor's office, asking to have a seat at the table to help solve some of these issues before January. We'll see if that makes any, you know, I can't speak for what the governor's thinking. I mean, he hasn't called me and let me know. So I don't know. I'll just say, I don't know what else we can do right now. He's the governor.
Is there any chance, I mean, legally the legislature can recall itself into session. I know it's not an easy thing to do. You know, the legislators of one party going against the governor of the same party, and normally it wouldn't happen, but these are extraordinary circumstances. Do you think there's any chance there can be some kind of a bipartisan agreement that we really don't have another 2 months to wait before we start taking action? Or is that completely off the table?
There was a bipartisan letter that Steve, Kevin, and I signed asking the governor that's still on file, asking for a special session. We didn't have the 2/3 majority, and I can't speak for colleagues who didn't sign such letter. So we were close, but we didn't have the 2/3. But it was a bipartisan letter. And I suspect that there's still bipartisan agreement that if we could get in November and start working on these issues, but
yeah. I'm not, you know, I understand the story, Kai, and I appreciate the concerns and the pressure people are under. just calling the legislature back into session, 98 representatives and 49 senators doesn't guarantee you a common mind on how to move forward on this stuff. The state, as you know, can't print money. The feds could print money, but the state can't. So where does that money come from? How does that impact other services that are, of course, being impacted by the layoffs and the other, things that are happening because of the virus? So just bringing the legislature back into session doesn't guarantee, a very strategic, surgical answer to what you're raising here. And there, when you look at how, the diversity within this state and the different impacts on different businesses and what the virus is doing to hospital censuses and just the general impact, do we give the money to hospitals and to people that are the frontline caregivers, or do we give the money to small businesses? The pathway is not clear. And I'm not so sure bringing the legislature back into session will provide that clarity. From where you sit, there's clarity, but if you look at the broader spectrum of needs and issues, I'm not convinced there is that clarity. So it's a challenge. There's no question about it.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that, Steve. There's the one parting comment here. This is a social cost the governor's order has imposed on a relatively small number of people. Very specific businesses were told you have to shut down for the safety of all. And I think it is up to the state to distribute that cost amongst all of the taxpayers in the state and not let just those business owners bear it. And if there ever was a rainy day, I would say this is it, particularly since there's reasonable hope that in 6 or 8 months, with distribution of a vaccine, there might be some relief. There are several vaccines that seem to be fairly effective and that not immediately, but by the middle of next year, might allow us to start reopening the economy again, if not earlier. So it's not something where we say, well, the rainy day fund doesn't last forever. It's really getting us through the next 6 months. So but I understand, Steve, it's a lot more complicated. And if you have 147 people with all their own agendas, nothing's going to happen very quickly. But it might happen more quickly if they started talking about it now than if they start talking about it in 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Ty. I think that's a good point. And I guess what Mike has been saying is folks are talking about it and trying to impact, the executive branch to target these dollars in ways that help folks. And I understand the immediacy and, that you speak about with your example, and Dale certainly highlighted that, having to lay off 14 people. That's a huge impact for them personally and for the economy. But multiply that by 7.2 million people and, things start getting complicated pretty quick. But I agree with you, the governor's, directive driven by what the virus is doing has an inordinate impact on the hospitality industry. And, that's, I don't think that's lost on anybody who's trying to figure out how to solve this problem.
And it does have to be said, it was the business community in the spring that made it very clear in Washington State, starting with the Association of Washington Business, the retail, the hospitality folks, look, about mask wearing. And it is clear that in our state, we did not wear masks enough. And you can say what the science does or doesn't say, but the business community since April has been basically pleading with folks, please socially distance, please wear a mask if you want to support the local economy. And the reason the virus is spiking, it would appear, is that we have not as a state nor as a nation embraced something that we know will slow. So the business community has been a leader in the public health arena as well. They also have been working with the governor's office. Their lobbying groups meet with him on a regular basis. The builders, made sure that outdoor building can still continue. So it wasn't near the draconian, but I think that, go on social media. There's just so many people that just think this is all a hoax and a mask doesn't do anything. And here we are. And we knew if you looked at the 1918 flu pandemic, you knew there was going to be a second wave. We knew it was coming in fall and winter, and we shouldn't be surprised. So I hope, it's not it's not the Democratic Party that's saying wear a mask. It's the Association of Washington Business. It's the Washington retail industry. This is a business-driven request in Washington State, and I really wish that that point was being made broader, and that it's not a partisan issue. It's a pro-business issue. Please, I was at Costco yesterday. Everybody's masked up. Didn't have to stand in line to get in. Moved right through. Got the few things I needed. You know, that's a company that stepped up very early and said, we can do this. Walmart also, and Walmart, you know, a lot of them will have offered masks. So this is on us as a society that this became that not everybody has socially distanced. We've also seen, you know, the house parties, the wedding parties. We have a number of members in the legislature who have come down with COVID. And when you trace back to where they were at political rallies, not wearing a mask. Steve and I weren't at political rallies this year, not wearing a mask. We don't have, you know, we've been lucky. I don't know. I just don't understand that part of it. But here we are, and we got to come up with some money. We got to help everybody. But, you know, as individuals, we can all help ourselves and help our society. I don't want to get you sick. You don't want to get me sick. That's why we're on Zoom this morning. Mm-hmm. So,
you know, I got to call BS on that, Mike, a little bit, what you're talking. I see the mask compliance at very high rates. This isn't spiking because people aren't wearing masks. It's doing what the viruses do. They're going to do it regardless. So, you know, we've been mandated to wear masks for what, 4 months, 5 months now. This spike came recently. So I just think that's that's BS throwing this on business, not complying. Masks have nothing to do with this spike right now.
And I disagree. I'll push back. That's BS.
So, well, I want to make sure that everybody knows that Serenity House has over $400,000 remaining right now for rent relief. So for your employees that you've had to lay off, it's not rent relief for businesses, it's rent relief for individuals. And then also OLECAP still has funding available, I think, till the end of the November. Commissioner Ozias, maybe you could correct that, but for mortgage relief for individuals. So, and then also the PUD has money available for electricity, power relief. They still have some funds, I believe. It is a little bit of a hassle to prove that you have been laid off and that kind of thing. You have to get letters from your employers, but there is that relief available. So Kai, Dale, everyone that is a employer, make sure that you have shared that information as a resource to your employees, or if they need it themselves, that is an option. So anyway, let's see. I want to move on to Renee. You had a next question, and hers is, what type of community services are a priority for each of the representatives? Steve and Mike?
I mean, what define community service? Is it?
Well, she's with the Dispute Resolution Center. So childcare or, you know, that kind of thing. Renee, if you want to chime in.
Yes, so specifically, Peninsula Dispute Resolution Center does receive funding, but I like to use the term 2019 BC, 2019 before COVID. We have increased our numbers due to the types of conflicts, whether it landlord tenants, mask wearing, nurses, all these issues that everybody's talking about today is conflict. And that comes to Peninsula Dispute Resolution Center. My concern is with this extra monies that we've received, it runs out in October. And we are now performing at a level that I'm proud of. We can serve our community with all of these issues, landlord, tenant, eviction, all of that. But my concern is that we are so busy, I'm having to hire staff just to meet the need. Once this funding goes down in October, that puts dispute resolution centers at risk. And I know Inslee in his proclamation has urged Washingtonians to call their local DRC and to help with some of these landlord-tenant issues. And the state has done just that. So my concern is not only just for myself as a community service, but the services that also serve the community. What are we going to do when funding is cut and our community needs us? Conflict is everywhere. It's the bottom line for all of these issues that we're having. So I'm just curious as to, and I know both of you have given great meeting time coming to Port Angeles and meeting in Olympia in regards to the dispute resolution centers. But I'm just hoping that dispute resolution services are a priority, if not mine, other human services in our 24th district.
Yeah, no, Renee, that's a great point. And as you've mentioned, dispute resolution has been an important sort of step in dealing with landlord-tenant issues, and that was, put into legislation, I think, a couple of years to highlight that step in trying to resolve some of these issues. And through that, actually, there has been an understanding of the need for broader support for dispute resolution centers. So that's the good news. I think other good news is in talking to budget writers, as Mike mentioned, I'm on the appropriations committee, and our leadership and the Senate leadership, the hope is not to go backwards with services in this budget cycle. For those of us that were around during the Great Recession, it was pretty painful to see the cuts to the programs. And as folks know, there's kind of an inverse relationship, right? As the economy tanks, the demand for services goes up and the revenue to provide those services isn't there. And so always a challenge the way those graphs interact, but the idea is to try to not go backward, because it just took us so long and the impact on people's lives was so great when we made those cuts back in 10 and 11. So that is the hope, is to not lose services, and obviously to look at areas that are, because of the virus, the need has increased. And I think you make a good case for dispute resolution centers as being one of those areas that would need funding. All that means, though, depending on the revenue forecast and how the economy is doing, there would have to be, additional revenue, either coming from, DC, which is always a challenge, and or additional revenue that can address some of these issues. But the hope right now with budget writers is not to go backwards with the budget for the next biennium.
Okay.
I just also real quickly, Colleen, want to mention that my center in particular, all of our services were in person, and I have trained all of our volunteers to now we do all of our services on Zoom, so we can have great access to justice and keep those services relevant now that we can keep people safe, and we're all on Zoom now providing those services.
That's great.
So thank you, Representative Tharinger.
So we have about 15 minutes remaining and a lot of questions left here. So I'm going to just highlight a few of them. Debbie Fusen has asked, what can the state do, basically, if anything, for people who at the end of the year will have exhausted all their normal benefits of unemployment and won't have any income at the end of the year? Is there any recognition of that issue, and is there anything that the state can do or will do to address that for those that are laid off?
Go right ahead, Mike.
Yeah.
This actually gets us, back to the LNI, to the unemployment, revenue stream. Again, hopefully the combination of state programs and federal programs, we can extend that. As you know, there's some challenges between the different programs right now. Our offices are getting inundated with people that are getting notices from ECD, ESD that are like, you owe us for back money. And we've kind of put a halt to that and trying to clarify that a little bit, but there's been different reimbursement rates for different programs. And as one expires, then you transition to another, so the rate's different. And it's a mess, quite frankly. The good news is they've halted putting out notices, and they're trying to work on, you know, the long-term formula here. But I think I mean, for those of you that, you know, sort of economics 101, I think there's a big advantage to the velocity of money, if you will. So even though this might be a social program, this is, I think, the reason that those dollars were there from the CARES Act, and there were dollars available in people's pockets. That's why I think our economy did as well as it did, which wasn't great, but in the last quarter. So I think people understand that putting that money, getting money to people that are unemployed, helps the economy, and there's, you know, that velocity of dollars moving through the economy is beneficial. The question is, where do those dollars come from? And, you know, hopefully some from the federal government, some from the state, but there will probably be gaps and challenges dealing with ESD on these different programs.
Okay.
You know, I just would say, you know, Colleen, you raised the question earlier about there seems to be a lot of response here in Clallam, and I will just say that the 24th district, when Mike and I talked to other legislators, we're very engaged. We're very, people are aware. And Colleen, I want to give you a shout out. I think you've done a great job of informing people and getting the money out the door to help them. And that's, you know, it's the 24th and the North Peninsula is different than other places when people are engaged, working together. And I think that's one of the reasons it hasn't been as terrible here as in some other places. So just a shout out to Colleen, but to everybody on the call. That's kind of the key here, is pulling together. I remember, you know, a quote from one of my hockey coaches in college. He said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And this is definitely a tough time. And we'd hoped we'd been out of this challenge by now, but we're not. It's gotten worse. So we need to toughen up here. And this is as good a team as there is in the state of people working to try to find solutions on keeping us, you know, whole and moving forward.
So I work in partnership with the EDC from Jefferson County, and that's Brian Koo, and he's got bad internet reception. So he asked if his question was around political appetite for TIF, which is tax increment financing, and the other question he had is about granting retail authority of last resort to PUDs or ports. What are our representatives' positions on those two issues?
As far as the PUD,
Go ahead, Mike.
well, I know Representative Hansen, who represents the district just to the east of us in North Kitsap County, he's working with the telecom providers on a piece of legislation to allow PUDs to become broadband providers. And that's an interesting, you know, Steve's been involved in that too and funding that, but there's definitely it looks like there'll be some piece of legislation to move forward to broaden out who can provide broadband.
That's right. I mean, it's interesting in this work we were doing, I mentioned for the Committee on Committees, there's a number of committees that are including broadband in their sort of mission. And I think it's a huge issue. We will obviously in the capital budget look at that part of it, you know, the infrastructure, the fiber and the satellites and that sort of thing. The other challenge, of course, is getting devices to folks and then the skills to be able to use those devices. But it's on everybody's screen. That's one of the things, as I think most folks on this call realize, has been really, the need has been highlighted by the virus and this distance interaction that we're all involved in. Tiff, I don't know if there's any specific legislation on TIF, and I don't know if folks know what that is. It's a financing mechanism. So if you need to put in some sort of project, you cap what your current rate is on, say, property tax and sales tax in that region. That stays with the existing institutions or structures, and then anything that comes above goes into the area to provide for that infrastructure or that investment. It's been knocking around the legislature for a while. I know when Mike and I looked at it locally when we were commissioners. I don't know right now whether there's any legislation proposed on that or specific legislation. There usually is something during the session, but I haven't seen anything just yet.
Okay, let's see. Also, we have some folks that represent either fitness centers or gyms. And so either Nikki or Art, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And Colleen, I will say in front of everybody, you've done an amazing job helping the community and, getting us information. And, congrats to Mike and Steve for reelect and being on this call. I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I do want to emphasize on the, sales tax, B&O tax, L&I, any of that can help, small businesses from the standpoint of not paying on a gross sales base versus kind of a net. I believe going into, a special session is important because it shows us that our representatives are in there fighting for us. To hear Chapman not really know what Inslee's thinking is a concern for me. So more of a statement there. But for gyms and restaurants, I really believe that if we can get a good example, Nikki's on the call from SportsFit. If she can train one person, that's $100 a month or 200, whatever the number is, that actually goes towards rent, and it does make a difference. If a restaurant can get in one family, you look at the numbers statewide, and I looked at the Department of Health just a couple days ago. Per 1,000-day case rate, like saying Walla Walla's 63, in Yakima is 18, and in Clallam County we're at 5.8. So if this is a state stamp on everybody, I think our representatives have to go back to that phase 2, phase 3. Let any business that can do something during this time do it. I also think health and wellness is a proactive approach to the healthcare industry and helping people on a positive level. I think we're very, very clean in our environment, and so I just don't think this should be just a statewide kind of situation. I think Clallam County is different than Spokane. I think Nikki's an amazing trainer that can help people become healthy for other reasons, because it's just not COVID people are fighting, but also fighting, other kind of health issues. So for her to train 3 people or for one family to go in, to Dale's restaurant, I just think we got to have that approach to get through this, because I think a lot of businesses, and I've been in Swim. I graduated in '91. My wife and I own Anytime Fitness. I own a company out in Carlsberg called AM Systems. So there's 30 employees that I try to go to sleep at night and make sure I can employ, and I've done it. But it's super hard. And I think the rainy day comment, I think we're kind of there. The money needs to come out to restaurants, gyms, anything that in other industries to help. So I just want to ask our representatives to really fight for a special session and get things moving towards a direction that can help your district, because I think that is why we vote, and I voted for both of you. But we need some help, and I hear it from all kinds of people. So a bit emotional, but the reality is if we can get one restaurant or one company another $100, whether it's through sales tax or letting them train an individual, I think that's where we're at. So if any of you guys have any thoughts on how we can get there, I'd appreciate that.
I mean, yeah, these are tough times and everybody's feeling the pinch a little bit. I don't know why I don't know the science behind what the governor used to make his decisions. And I guess when I say I don't know, he's laid that out. I'm trying to follow it. So apparently he had science that said restaurants and gyms were going to lead to the spread of COVID. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm not qualified to say whether I agree or disagree with that.
Are we done with the per county phase 2, phase 3, or phase 2.2 or 2.0 or whatever that silliness is? Is that all done? Like, so we're seeing the same as Spokane and Yakima as far as a threat to spread COVID.
Well,
statewide, that's how we're seeing.
We've now moved we've moved into a higher range just in the last week. I think the paper just indicated we're back to the higher range. So we're not as low as we were on the cases per 100,000.
But if you look at it, and I have it month by month, we are doing like twice the testing. So numbers have to go up. Our percent positive rate has not really changed that much if you look at the data and the science.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Lena, you had a question or a concern that you wanted to share about grants?
I just wanted to mention, I would anticipate that, and I'm hoping that more grant funding will be available. I know, Colleen, you mentioned loan options, but I just wanted to share a few challenges that I've run into in working with both federal, state and local grants that have come up. One is that has been a challenge, I think, that Colleen can probably appreciate, is that this deadline for spending. So with the CARES Act, there was a deadline that all of the funding had to be spent by November 30th, which created an issue with, as the funds came in, what expenses could be utilized for those funds. The other thing that I've run into is that some of them are reimbursements, meaning you have to have already spent the money, but it defines how you can use the funds. So we just submitted some grants this week that were capital improvement grants, but the money has to be spent by December 31st. So logistically speaking, that becomes a real challenge for business owners to try and spend that money and in fact, they want you to spend it before you even are awarded the funding. So just things to be thinking about when we're developing these systems and grant potentials that are coming up. The other thing would be, I know that it's very important that we maintain accountability for the grants that are being spent. And I think that the EDC has done an excellent job in trying to maintain the accountability for the grants that I've been working with them on. But the reimbursement style grants are more challenging than saying, okay, you can use this funding to pay your rent, even if you haven't paid it yet. So trying to be flexible, as well as getting the funding to these businesses as quickly as possible, particularly in light of the recent closures, I think are very important things to consider when developing the process for these grants. And I know that both of your hands are tied related to the special session. We've talked about that several times over the last few months. But waiting, and I'm hoping that something comes out before January, because by then, many of these businesses I would envision will be closed. So those are my comments. Thank you for being here and allowing me to share.
Thanks, Lena.
No, I appreciate, Lena, your comments, and also Art, your comments. And, we're dialoguing with the governor's office and with other legislators to try and, provide as much flexibility as possible. I think probably the data is coming from other countries where, they've made the choices to close gyms, close bars, and keep their schools open. And so there's, a lot of different ways to approach this. The peninsula, the Clallam and Jefferson is definitely different than, Everett and Linwood. But again, the key is for all of us to be very aware of the sort of nature of this virus, wanting to find hosts and wanting to spread. And we'll, as we manage it, as people manage it up here, we will try to manage it at in Olympia at the legislative level to provide the flexibility. I don't think we question your, your attempt to do this safely. It's just, as you guys know, a very complex equation.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock. However, I see that my board chair has his hand up. And Brian Garrett, do you have something that you wanted to end the meeting on?
Yeah, just a quick question. It seems now we've gone through this lockdown, as Dale so adamantly portrayed it, and others. Small businesses have been, seems selected to bear the brunt of this. But I look at some of the others, and I'm looking at the casinos, the tribal casinos primarily, that there's been no mention of those being closed, yet a number of people congregate. And now with other venues closed, such as Dale's Oasis, people that want to go out are going to congregate more in those fewer opportunities. And it seems those communities that have the casinos are going to be at higher risk. And has the governor addressed anything with the tribal communities?
Well, I didn't see anything in his latest order. He has been in, they've been in consultation, and I don't know the rules that, I know Jamestown was shut down this spring. I don't know what rules they're operating under right now. I do know that they probably are very clear that if you come in, you're going to be wearing a proper mask. But it's a valid point. Look, everybody's points today are valid. I wish I had the answers. I mean, these are complicated issues. I'm one of 148. That's not an excuse. Steve's one of 148. We have 3 branches of government. These are all valid points. I don't know the answer. I don't know what the governor's looked at. I don't know the meetings he's had that I haven't been a part of with the University of Washington and the health professionals. So there is that. He has information none of us have, and he's made the decisions that he's made.
So
I'm saying, I think the people are really frustrated today. I think I'm just as frustrated, in all fairness.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate, look, you all are a representation of the dozens and dozens and dozens of emails that have come in the last 2 days. And I don't have an answer. I can't write back, this is exactly how we should proceed. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to fix it all. I wish I could. And I have personal people in my life who are being impacted by these shutdowns, who are losing money, who lost their job this week. So, and they're working hard to land on their, so yeah, this is frustrating. We're all frustrated. We're doing our best. But don't think that,
So
I don't have an answer. I'm sorry. I wish I did.
I gotta say that I know that our legislators are fighting for us. These 2 on the call here have been really stalwart advocates for Clallam County. And I do see that the Commissioner Ozias and Commissioner Johnson are both on the call. And we are past 9, but if you guys want to go a little bit further, I'm happy to continue to keep this going. Commissioner Ozias, do you want to share where we are as far as Dr. Unthank's analysis and COVID cases in the county today?
Yeah, sure. Dr. Unthank reported to the Board of Health yesterday that we've seen a significant uptick in cases. Last week, our case count was 27 per 100,000 population. It currently sits at 87 per 100,000 population. And this is particularly distressing because it's being driven by outbreaks at 2 separate healthcare facilities, 1 long-term care facility, as well as a church. And the biggest concern right now is that with the impacts on healthcare facilities and long-term care, that's putting significant stress on our fragile local healthcare system. And so, of course, with this spike in cases that we're seeing right now, we wouldn't expect to see hospitalizations really start to rise for the next couple of weeks. So, anything we can do now to turn that train around is really important. And the point that I'd just like to try and leave everyone with is, that we need to look at this from a systemic level and not from a personal level, and that's really, really hard to do. As someone who has owned a business, I understand how personal it is. But what we heard yesterday is, what we're looking at if our local healthcare system does get overwhelmed is, we're looking at having to go back to potentially not being able to do elective surgeries, pulling staff, nurses, and physicians from clinics, either to work in the long-term care facility or at the hospital. Ultimately, if things get bad enough, we're looking at needing to have providers who aren't adequately trained performing ICU level work. And if it really gets bad enough, then eventually not having enough bed space. So obviously those are all just possibilities at this point. But I would say that Dr. Unthank struck the most concerned note that I have heard throughout the entirety of this pandemic at yesterday's Board of Health meeting, and I felt it was a very sobering message that is important for all of us to pay attention to.
Thank you. Did she share whether those outbreaks were in Port Angeles, Sequim, or in the West End? She didn't. Okay.
No, she didn't. My understanding is that the cases have been rising all across the county, but I don't have any specifics on which facilities.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Johnson, is there anything you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, sorry, not really, but thank you.
Okay, certainly. Cindy Kelly did add that the El Wasp Casino hasn't been open since March. So anyway, just that piece of information. So
it's important to, and Mark made a good point. And I saw a couple of comments questioning about healthcare. I mean, look, let's thank every healthcare worker. Let's thank all of them have been put in impossible situations, and they're dealing with this on the front line. And let's be grateful that we have men and women. And I live next to 2 nurses. I talk to them all the time. Let's be grateful we have men and women who are willing to put their lives on the line every day to take care of those in a multitude of situations. And Mark, you made a good point about elective surgeries. We know this spring that was costing OMC potentially millions of dollars of revenue every week when the elective surgery weren't allowed to occur. The hospital association did work with the governor's office to coordinate, so they have the flexibility as of right now. But if their beds are overwhelmed, but don't ever think that the impression should not be that this is somehow the healthcare workers' fault if there's some outbreaks. Steve and I visited the long-term care homes, the circumstances that they work. I mean, they're on top of everybody. And then the hospital and the medical professionals, they're all trying to keep their office open. I mean, the dentists are trying to keep their offices open. The doctors, think of a dentist. What do they do all day long? They're in close proximity. They've had to put in incredible PPE protection. So in all of this, those of us on the government side, those on the private sector side, we're frustrated. The healthcare workers, though, need a particular shout out of thanks for the work that they do to provide the healthcare that you and I need still. People still need regular healthcare. They need regular dental care. So I think that's why the public health officials have been so afraid about the hospital being overrun with cases of COVID, because it would eliminate the ability. And delayed surgeries can lead to further complications down the road. So they're managing. I know we meet with OMC every 2 weeks. Steve, Kevin, and I, all the way since this came out, we get an update. They're managing their budget. They're doing a hell of a job. They're doing the very best they can. They, are working on contact tracing 24/7 right now. So there was a question about contact tracing. I know the hospital's doing that. I mean, they're on top of this, you guys. You have a great leader. I know John was on the call. You got a great leadership team over there, and they're working 24/7. And so you do have people in this community that are working really hard to protect everybody on the North Olympic Peninsula. And I know that you all realize that. So, but it would go without saying to thank them as well.
Yeah, very tough conversations. But it's good I think this platform is a good opportunity, a safe opportunity for people to share with their representatives their concerns and what they're seeing and feeling. So I appreciate you being on with us. Representative Tharinger, are there any last parting words you want to add? And then we'll call it a morning.
No, I mean, a really tough discussion, but a good discussion. And, you know, keep bringing information to us, you know, and we can move that along up the line. It also helps as we have conversations with other legislators to see, you know, if something really distills out so that it would make some sense to go into a special session and do some very, you know, sort of focused actions. I don't think there's an advantage of getting the legislature back together unless we have that focus, because it could be, you know, it could be not that productive, quite frankly. So, yeah, you know, we're in contact with Colleen. You can get Colleen information, but certainly emails and stuff as we try to figure out a pathway through this. I think it's, you know, it is, we need flexibility, but as I think Mark so well explained, it is a systematic situation. It's not just our businesses. It's a very complex interaction of relationships, economic and health-wise. And so we just need to be aware of that. And hopefully, you know, in the next month, we could come out the other end of this and be back in a more robust economic activity. So, but yeah, keep the cards and letters coming in, and let's try to see if there's something we can do to focus our efforts in Olympia. But certainly appreciate the conversation.
And don't forget, you guys, what I said at the very beginning. So the first week of December, we have committee days. So in essence, the legislature will be starting our committee work. Legislation will be being discussed. Maybe we come back and touch base with you all after committee days in mid-December before the holidays. We'll probably have even more information at that time because we will have met as a body. And I think that'd be a fruitful conversation. And then I think we should probably, since we'll be doing so much Zoom, we probably should just stay in touch with you during the session. I know normally we would disappear into Olympia and then come back in April, but I think so many people are so engaged on this issue. I think there's some valid, at least one of us joining you maybe on a weekly or every other week during the session. So I would offer that. I think between the three of us, one of us can join to give you a 10-15 minute update. But I think come back after our committee days, because in essence, we are going to be working as a legislative body during the committee process in just a couple of weeks. So I don't want people to think we're just sitting around doing nothing. We're having lots of meetings. All of our committees are meeting in our subgroups. All of your lobbying, all of your trade groups are contacting us. There was a couple of trade representatives, lobbyist representatives on the call. So we're working hard, but maybe we should come back after our committee days. We'll probably have even some more information, and then let's meet regularly. You guys are engaged. We had, what, 50, 60 people on this call. So that tells me that folks are engaged. So that's what I would offer.
Great, thank you. And we'll have Jennifer Burkhart on too in a few weeks here. We've got Representative Tharinger scheduled for next week, and we'll figure out if we're gonna still do that or whether you feel like you've given your input today, however you want to handle it.
I don't know if I'll have much more to add in a week, but it might be actually more helpful to hear from the healthcare sector or some of the other sectors of the work they're doing. So, but that's your call, Colleen. I'm more than happy to do it. But
maybe Dr. Upthink and Mark Ozias, just from what they're seeing.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great morning, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks for joining us.